Hey everybody, and welcome to Coffee Catch-Ups with me, Amelia Beaumont.
And me, Tanya Wiley.
Coffee Catch-Ups is a Christian podcast all about life in your 20s. Just to kind of disclaimer, we are not teachers, we are not theologians, we are not scholars. We are just two people who love Jesus and want to live for him. What are we actually talking about today?
We are talking about the very Christian phrase, thought life.
Ah, so Christian.
What does it mean when people at the front of church or a lot of Christians say the phrase thought life?
I think it just kind of basically means kind of what it says. So like the way that you navigate your mind and your thoughts and all of the stuff that just goes on internally. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important topic to talk about, isn't it? Because actually, this, as Christians, like our thought life is kind of the difference between approaching life with Jesus and approaching life not with Jesus, isn't it? Essentially,
Yeah.
like because we can get so kind of caught up between how the world approaches things and how we are told to approach things in the Bible.
Yeah, I do. I know what you mean. And I'm really glad we're talking about this because thought life links to absolutely everything. It has huge links to mental health as well, because it's all about what's going on in your brain. And for today, for the now, for our generation in the Western world, I think the enemy, this is his attack line, thought.
Mm-hmm.
It has always been, of course it has. But I think especially now when he can't get you necessarily with famine or with disease, he's going, well, how else can I get them? This is why it's really important as Christians to have that discipline, that thought life discipline. And boy, oh boy, it is difficult. Yeah,
Really, really difficult.
really difficult.
There's a great Bible verse actually that links really well to what we're talking about today. It is 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, powerful verse. It's
Mhm.
one that my lovely mother quotes frequently. She's so good at reminding me and my sister and my dad on occasion as well, like, take every thought captive. Actually, that thought that's not of God. Take it captive, make it obedient to Christ, and you're like you kind of, me and my sister sometimes kind of go, yeah, we know, but she's right. She's not like, you can't fault what she's saying because it's biblical.
Yeah.
Um, it's really, really, really important because actually there's so much of the time when I go, I don't know what's happening. Like, this situation's come up and I really don't know how to handle it. My mum's gone, yeah, all of that fear. No, no, no. Take every thought captive. Come on. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I
Yeah.
actually do. I do really need to do that. But it's not as easy as it sounds, is it?
No, no, it really isn't easy. I know for sure my thoughts can get away from me, and they can certainly spiral upwards, downwards, sideways, everywhere. And it is so difficult to have that. Again, I say it, the word discipline over your thoughts. But the reason I think it is so important, and I'm going to come back to another Bible verse, which says, do not conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is,
Mm-hmm.
his good and pleasing and perfect will. So that is Romans 12:2. But that verse for me just shows us how important it is to keep renewing. And I love the word renew. It's not just like, hey, fix it, get your mind sorted, boom, you're good to go, bosh. It's about this constant renewing, this constant work. And that is definitely my experience, that it is not a one-time fix. It isn't like you become a Christian and boom, everything's fine in your head. If anything, you have to have that much more conscious renew it, renew it, renew it. And that is so hard.
I know, isn't it just?
Yeah.
I think because there's that whole thing, isn't there, of being in the world but not of it.
Mhm.
But the fact is, we are in the world. and it's really hard to like.
We're human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Are there any times in your life where you feel that you've been really burdened with your thought life?
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly when I was in my previous job, and I know we talked about this a lot in series one, um, like the whole I feel like I'm never gonna get out of this,
Oh,
or you know, um, or well, how am I ever gonna have the money to move out or to do this or to do that, or all of this stuff. Um, and I was actually really bad at praying about it and taking
mm.
all of that stuff to Jesus at that point, because I just kind of didn't. I just because I felt kind of stuck. Um, and my human brain went, well, unless Jesus does some massive flashy miracle thing, which he usually doesn't do, like I don't really see a way out of this. Um, and yeah, and that's completely on me. Like, it was the way that it happened that I did get into this current job was obviously by me actually like getting off my bum and doing something about it.
Yeah.
It's not that I wasn't before, but like, actually kind of I, I think because I struggle with change as well, it was partially kind of like making that change happen is really scary. Uh,
Yeah.
and all of the stuff that kind of comes with that. Um, but yeah, but I at times in that job I was in really dark places, um, in terms of just kind of thinking about the future,
Yeah.
and just again like the catastrophizing,
Yes.
is something that I'm unfortunately very good at.
Yeah, it's easily done. It's a real issue, and for myself, I've definitely found um kind of lots of ruminating, catastrophizing, like you're saying, Amelia, and just getting stuck. And sometimes it isn't always, oh no, like I'm gonna die alone. That's one of my things. Do you know, actually, I got stuck for a while on this random thought, and it still pops into my head now. And I convinced myself that it's just a practical thought. It's not me catastrophizing or being dramatic or depressing. And the thought was, because of my job, because I travel around so much, and this thought only generally comes when I'm single. I travel around, and so I had this thought, which was, if I died, it would take about a week for anyone to realize. And that thought is so depressing. But I convinced myself that that was just me looking at my life practically and going, well, that's true. And to be fair, it could be. But that thought being in here, occupying my brain, is not helpful and is planting seeds of despair and of loneliness and whatever thoughts and feelings and emotions come from that, and the more that expands, and that is the problem with thinking about things and going over it and catastrophizing. And it can also happen on obsessing. We
Yeah,
talk about it in the episode on unrequited love. We talk about obsessing and hoping for the, and in hope, obsessing. Oh, they love me. And we can do that as well in rage and hatred. And we can think about how much I don't like that person. I really hate that person. They wind me up when they do this and they do that. And to be fair, this has happened to me today a little bit. So maybe I'm calling myself out. Who knows? Someone was mansplaining to me today, and I didn't enjoy it. Um,
the worst.
but if I think about it a lot,
Mm,
it magnifies actually what happened. This person mansplained to me,
mm,
and they may not have realized they've done it
yeah,
because they're not very self-aware, but that's another point in general. But if I think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it, it is going to become so much bigger. And the minute they say even a tiny little explanation, I'm going to get cross instantly. And so these are some of the issues when we don't have that self-control and that self-discipline. So how do we not to conform to the patterns of this world, and renew our mind. How do we hold every thought captive?
I think practice is actually just kind of like just a huge part of this, isn't it? Um, Forming the habit of doing those things regularly. And by those things, I mean prayer, spending time with Jesus. Because, you know, again, it's all about how you kind of how you spend your time and who you spend your time with.
Mhm.
And, if you're spending all of your time with the people around you, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, people are flawed. And as much as you might have some really positive influences from your friends, again, Christian or non-Christian, actually, nobody is as good to spend time with as Jesus.
Mm,
And he is the one who can help you with all of these things.
love
Um,
that.
to renew your mind. He gives you that refreshment that you need. He gives you the strength sometimes to take those thoughts captive, um, and and all of those things. And I think that's the spiritual answer, but also
Yeah, very spiritual and also very Sunday school. Just pray.
yeah, Sunday school.
No, but a very good point. I don't mean to tease. And you know how when you have conversation with this in the world about how to help worry and how to help when you're spiraling and panic attacks and things like that, they often say practice mindfulness. Um,
Yes.
and although that can be very helpful for people, but I think the Christian version of that, the better version, the much more powerful one, is the prayer,
Mm,
because that takes you immediately from looking here
yeah.
to looking up.
And it's so easy again to focus on yourself because again that's what we're like, the physical is what we're seeing, it's what we're experiencing. But the more that we focus our mind on, like, I think there's a verse that says, focus your mind on things above. um
Yes, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, and whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
yes, love that. And
Love
what that
it.
verse doesn't mean is that we should be the very sort of airy fairy kind of Christians that
Yeah.
are constantly kind of prancing about and everything's absolutely fine and like having no grip on reality. But actually, what it does mean is that in the midst of the storm, like, I have joy and I have hope.
Mm,
And I know that life is still beautiful
yeah.
because I have Jesus in it. Um,
Mm.
and it was, do you know what? It was really funny actually. I was talking to my mum about this exact thing last night. So I've just got a bit of a situation going on in terms of kind of like financial stuff. But I was talking to my mum and just having a bit of a moan on the phone. And she was like, again, as I say, kind of take every thought captive. But also, that's it's tough, but you need to make sure that you are focusing yourself on Jesus and remind yourself of all of the times that he's been faithful to you.
Mm.
And I was about to go into church. I was waiting in the car park, and just while we were finishing up our conversation, and then I went into church, and the sermon was on focusing on Jesus during the storm, and I was like, Lord, I feel like you might be trying to say something. Yeah, I guess just kind of like my encouragement from that is that Jesus knows.
Yeah, I love what you say though earlier, like about being kind of joyful, because I was just looking up this verse in Philippians, and you always got to look around the verse as well,
Yeah.
and it says just before, rejoice in the Lord always. Say it again, rejoice.
Yeah.
Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer. Yes, Amelia, your Sunday school answer was dead on. And petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. So that's a very interesting verse because it tells us to do something.
Mm.
Quite actual physical things that you can do in the sense of praying and rejoicing. And so that's really reminds me of that yeah, the songs of the genre of Raise a Hallelujah that are even in the storm say rejoice. And that is so difficult to do, but I know from personal experience the power of that. I remember praising Jesus after one of my friends died, and it was the most unfleshly thing, but it was incredibly uh, renewing for my mind and soul just to do that. As even if you're crying, it doesn't have to be silly dancing and upbeat. I'm more Christian. I'm always happy, but the rejoicing in the Lord is different to just being happy all the time. There is a difference. Then
Oh,
that verse goes on and says, think about whatever is noble, whatever is good, whatever is, I would say a modern word for that is also whatever is wholesome. I use that word all the time.
absolutely, absolutely. I really love that. And yeah, and the whole thought life thing doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. Actually, when we do focus on the good things in
Yeah.
life, it shows. There's a really great quote from the a book you may be familiar with, Roald Dahl's The Twits. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on the face. And when that person has ugly thoughts every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until it gets so ugly you can hardly bear to look at it. A person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose and a crooked mouth and a double chin and stick out teeth, but if you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams and you will always look lovely.
Yeah, I love that quote. Love a bit of Roald
Great.
Dahl.
Love it. So good. We've got everything in this podcast. We've got the Bible and we've got Roald Dahl.
It's that
And
everything. That
I don't
constitutes
think we
everything.
need anything else really.
I think it is so true. I definitely notice myself being a different person in the way even in the way I hold myself
Mm,
when you're sort of stuck in a bad thought cycle. Like earlier this year, I was really struggling with not having any work, as is my continual struggle
mm,
and continual blessing. I've started using a phrase now, actually, called booked and blessed, which for whenever I get a gig, I say, I'm booked and blessed. And I go, God, we pray for bookings and blessings, booking and blessings. And I don't know why, since I've adopted that, I have this different attitude. Um, but anyway, earlier in the year, I was really struggling and I was living with my parents again. They are incredible people, love them dearly, but there is something, a feeling of stuckness when you are in your parents' house and you've got no work. So there is a real feeling of stuck. I'm stuck. And this was only a couple of months. So it really, and I did have like little bits and bobs. So really, I had no real reason to let my mind spiral as it did, but boy, did I let it spiral. And it really took a physical um thing in me. Like I was slightly more stooped, I wasn't looking up, I was looking down more. This kind of your mind is so powerful. It
mm.
is powerful. And in both ways, you can make your posture more rounded and more down, but equally, you can do the opposite. Your mind can be an incredible resource. And that's kind of, I guess, the encouragement I want to give you if you're thinking, gosh, it's really difficult being of this generation in this world where we've got really lots of issues with mental health, and I really struggle. And particularly if stuff has happened to you in the past, if you've got a history with trauma or lots of mental health needs or whatever it is, or you just struggle with what's going on in your head, or you feel like you can't communicate it. The good news is that we can make this brain, your brain, like you can make it a powerful tool for good, for God.
Yes.
Ah, but how do we do that? Like practically, how can we start to make this the engine house of goodness, gentleness, kindness, everything the fruits of the spirit have, rather than just spiraling, I'm scared, I'm worried, blah, blah, blah.
I think having just kind of an awareness of what you are. consuming. And I mean, part of that is physical food.
Yeah.
Obviously, some food is, going to be better for you than other food. And, um,
Mm,
if you are eating healthily, then actually that's going to be helpful. But what I meant more by consuming is in terms of like the TV, the books, the all of the media, what you read, what you watch,
mm,
can also be really impactful.
yeah.
And if you are, I guess I don't know whether if you're say watching nothing but the news
Mm.
and reading, I don't know, just really like depressing books, and then you're finding that your thought life is actually really negative. They might have something to do with what you're consuming. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, what a good point on a really practical basis.
And as well, and I think the other thing is the relationships that you've got.
Yes.
How are
Yeah.
your relationships? And if you have a life full of relationships that are difficult or negative or toxic,
Yeah. Or
again, then
gossipy.
that's gonna or gossipy, like
Yeah.
all of that is gonna have an effect. And so actually, like, is there something that you maybe can do about that? Is there a conversation maybe that you need to have? Or, or even not to be too extreme, but to cut somebody out. Because actually, not not to sound so terribly Gen Z, but you don't need that negativity in your life. You know what I mean?
And actually, all of this stuff starts with self-reflection.
Mm,
Taking a step back I would advise in a prayerful space, maybe after a fantastic worship session or prayer moment where you feel really close with the Spirit, and just stepping back, even now as you're listening, and going, what is my thought life like?
mm,
How much time do I spend worrying, not kind thoughts about other people?
mm,
Whatever it is that you think could be improved about your thought life, having a think about why it is that you might think like that more. And
mm.
is there anything after that self-reflection that you might be able to do to move your mind into a more positive space?
Yeah.
Um, whilst, we're also very sensitive to how difficult that is, and it is a slow process. So
Mm,
begin now, why not?
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I actually wanted to say on
yeah.
in terms of the reflective space as
Mm,
well. I think getting to that place in terms of putting ourselves in that place can also be really difficult
yeah.
in terms of actually taking the time to self-reflect because we're afraid of that too. And I
Yeah.
think it can be really easy to be like, well, but if I go into that space, what is God going to do? What's he going to say? And we always kind of get this fear as well. And again, at least in my experience, it might be different for you, and that's fine. That's great if it is. But you kind of get this like sort of anxiety over if I actually do this and if I actually sit down, what what's he going to do?
Yeah.
And I think as an encouragement to those of us who do find that really difficult, in terms of in terms of actually sitting down and reflecting with along with the Holy Spirit, um, he's really gentle.
Yeah.
He's
Mhm.
really gentle, and I had some prayer ministry a few weeks ago. It's called Sozo Prayer. Really, fully recommend it. It's wonderful. I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna end up a blubbering mess. But I'd like booked my slot and everything, and I was like, okay, no, I have to go through with this now. Um, and I came out of it and was like, oh, I don't feel like I've been like ripped into. Like I've not been told off.
Yeah.
Um, I've been healed,
Yeah.
and and again, as Tanya said, it's not an immediate thing. Like healing from the Lord can come very, very slowly.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will be immediate, but more often than not, it will be very slow. Because it's a process. But yeah, don't be afraid of that space.
That's
Um,
a really lovely point, Amelia. I love that. God is gentle with us. And often in this journey, you'll be learning little things at a time. about how to look after this, because it's a very personal thing. Your mind and your thoughts are different. I know we have quite similar patterns and we tend to catastrophize, but a lot of people can overinflate and can overinflate themselves and other things. And so God deals with us as individuals, as people. And I love what you say about he is gentle.
Mm.
And, sometimes it's a really good thing to step back and go, actually, look what he's done with me so far. You
Yeah,
know, you've got to
yeah.
put in the work, like you said, Amelia, earlier, but look what God has done. Look
Mm.
how far I've come, even if it's on one thing,
Yeah,
even if you always used to do this thing where you constantly blame yourself and now you don't constantly blame yourself. You just blame yourself 60% of the time where it would have been 100% or something like that.
yeah,
What a miracle. God is so gentle, but so powerful. And in his gentleness, he is also powerful. Um,
yes.
so, actually have a little think now what he's done already with your thought life.
Yeah.
Ask for more.
Yeah. And
Um,
on that gentleness as well, there's a beautiful verse in Hosea, which I'm going to find now actually, which has been a really significant one for me. I remember I sort of discovered this when I was doing a Bible study with a friend. Okay, so the verse is it's kind of in the context of like an unfaithful wife, and the all of the awful things that she's done have been listed. She has been adulterous. She has burned incense to idols. She has gone after loads and loads of lovers, and she's made herself look very beautiful. But all of it's very false. Um, and all of that is listed. And then Hosea 2, verse 14. Therefore, I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. There I will give her back her vineyards, and I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. Um, there she will respond as in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. And it's just the most beautiful image of God gently restoring.
mm,
It's like you've kind of obviously this is kind of in slightly different context to what we're talking about, but in terms of us kind of taking that reflective time with the Holy Spirit as we were talking about, and if you're afraid of what He's going to say to you, actually, even if you've done all of that, even if you've been incredibly unfaithful to God and done all of this awful stuff, He always speaks gently.
yeah. Yeah.
It's very, very rare that He will come in with wrath and anger and big booming voice and you've done wrong and therefore you must repent. um it's this gentle, hey, I love you, hey,
Mm.
let's go this way now.
Yeah, I love that. Um I love Hosea actually. I think it's a great book. Of how God speaks to us and how he can be gentle. Um and I think, sometimes being gentle with yourself is also really important. How many times do you catch yourself thinking bad things about yourself? And if someone else done that, you wouldn't care, you
Yeah.
know? Sometimes we can go the other way and we can have too much inflated sense of self, but also if you struggle with thinking horrible negative things about yourself or your circumstances, I also think the power of words. We've been given both a brain and a tongue. Saying stuff over yourself to contradict the lies in your mind.
Mm.
Especially if you feel like you're under spiritual attack, actually saying the truth out loud to other people or just to yourself. Because what that does when you say something out loud, I've said this before on the podcast, but I'm going to say it again. When you say something out loud, you're using two sides of your brain. When you think something, you are only using one side of your brain. So,
Mm.
for my example, my always go-to example is a trivial one, but it illustrates my point. If I were to think, do you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to go on a diet. But if I was to say it out loud, tomorrow I'm going to go on a diet and say it, I am much more likely to stick and complete that action than if I just think it. And then if I say it again and again and again, and the more I say it, the more people I say it to, the more that becomes something I am going to do, because it's created these pathways in your mind. And so if you are someone who self-deprecates to a point where this is actually criticizing God's creation, or if you are catastrophizing or depressed, start saying the opposite of those lies, even if you don't believe them, because that has psychological power, which is also can be used by God, godly power, because he made brains. So
Yes.
it's a trick that you can hijack for the goodness of God and for the goodness of your mind.
Mm.
It's taking these things and re-angling it, and that is what the enemy will hate. And in our modern time, that is how Satan loves to attack us. So put armor on your brain.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. Do you know what? It's funny you say that because I was thinking we'd love to talk about the helmet of salvation in this week.
Yeah.
But actually, the helmet, what does it protect? Your head, your brain. And I think it's really interesting that Ephesians, that Paul, when writing to the Ephesians, uses salvation as an image when we're
Mm,
talking about the helmet and protecting your head and your mind. And it's like actually that salvation is the crown that you wear, and you wear that into battle,
yeah.
um, and and therefore it's your salvation. It's the fact that you are a child of God
Mm.
and saved by the blood of Jesus. That is your. I know it doesn't say crown, but it is your crowning glory.
Your helmet. Yeah.
Yeah, and and that crowning glory, that salvation, is what protects you from the attacks of the enemy. It's what you can use to protect your mind. It's what
Yeah.
you can use to rearrange your thought life. It's what you can use to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Um, and yeah, no, I really love that image, and I just
Love
think
that.
it's really interesting that salvation is the thing that you wear.
And so actually maybe we just need to be thinking about that more, about salvation more.
Mm, yeah,
Um, And it's okay to also to mess up and get things wrong and find your mind doing stuff, but you can always get it back. You're never lost in your brain forever, and it can feel like that sometimes. But remember, when we're talking about salvation, we were so lost,
mm,
and Jesus died so that we were no longer lost. And there are so many references to loss, being lost in the Bible and then being found. 99 sheep, for example, and Jesus goes after the one. There is your brain seems so sometimes can seem so like something you'll never have a full handle on, but you are not lost. You are not lost in despair or in self-deprecation or whatever the things that haunt you.
mm.
Because there is that helmet of salvation, and salvation is the opposite of being lost.
Yeah, I have no words to follow that. But no, like you're so right. You're so right. And the other thought that I had as well is actually, you know, again, helmet of salvation, wearing that on your head. The brain is what controls the rest of the body. And so, actually, like if you wear salvation on your head and let salvation kind of, yeah, guard and protect your brain and your thoughts, that's going to translate into everything else.
Mm. And
Like,
the helmet is often the most important part of your protective gear. Like if you're going cycling, you will put on a helmet before you put on knee pads or elbow pads. They're generally for the downhill people, downhill biking, not downhill people. That's bad. At the horse riding, always have your helmet on before you have your body protector on. Like that's the thing. You're protecting that precious cargo because your brain is really precious. Your mind is really precious. And this is a battleground that you can win with Jesus.
yes, come on.
So, Amelia, would you rather walk to work in heels or drive to work in reverse?
Oh my gosh. Both of those ideas absolutely fill me with dread because my commute to work is over Dartmoor. And so if I were to walk, as much as it's all on road, if I were to walk in heels, that would be like, I don't know how many hours it would take me because it takes like 25 minutes to drive. So it would take a long time to walk in heels and I would be dying. I mean, I could do it in reverse, but like it's again because it's Dartmoor, you got a lot of those like very narrow lanes. That's horrendous. I don't even know what I'd pick. I mean, purely for the sake of not spending hours with like bleeding feet, probably reverse in the car, but it would be a horrible experience. That's mental. Which would you do?
Um, it would very much depend on where I was commuting to, because I don't have one place of work. If I was in London, walk in heels, no problem. Even though my London job is tour guiding, so I then have to do the tour in heels.
Mm.
But it didn't specify what kind of heels. So if it's a boot heel with a thicker, that's okay. But a
Oh, okay,
stiletto
yeah,
heel,
that's true.
yeah, would be horrific. But I would do that. But if I was in Devon or in some, definitely drive in reverse. Like it's just too much. If I was doing your commute, I would go with drive in reverse as well.
Would you rather be able to read minds or move things with your mind?
Move things.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what people are thinking.
Do you not?
No, I think ignorance is bliss sometimes. Um, and
Uh,
also the practicalities of knowing what people are thinking. Imagine being in a busy tube.
mm.
Would you have the
Oh,
sound of 1,000 people's voices in your head? Like in Bruce Almighty when he gets all
yeah.
the prayer requests and no, no, no.
Yeah, true. But
No.
I feel like, I don't know, maybe you'd be able to turn it off. As in, like, you'd be able to pick, I want to read this person's mind, and then you read their mind, as
Ah,
opposed to
like a menu.
having a constant cacophony of voices.
Even then, I'd quite like to move stuff with my mind.
Yeah, that is quite cool, isn't it?
That is cool, but even actually, I could forgo both of those. I'm trying to think of when it would be useful to move stuff with my mind that I can't just do anyway.
Yeah,
Suitcase,
yes.
heavy backpack.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Delayed train, just move it.
Yeah. That's some powerful telekinesis you've got going on.
What about
Um,
you? What would you do?
do you know what? I think I would go for reading people's minds.
You.
I'm too curious. I would just want to, and I think because I'm a people pleaser as well, I would
Mm.
kind of just have to know.
Yeah, but
Um,
wouldn't that be make your people pleasing worse?
I know probably would, mate, but I just, I don't know. I think I would want to know too badly, and I'm also terrible for wanting to know the tea.
I think you're playing a dangerous game with the reading people's mind thing because that may cause you a lot of problems in your thought life.
Ooh.